Now comes the fun part. And he's squirming already. Yeah, got him over here. And Greg has been a great friend of mine. We've had a good working relation together on the board and on the executive, and I can't tell you how much I appreciated working with Greg. So Greg, we've plugged the chair in, it's warmed up, it's ready to go. You need to come up and take your seat.
Is this safe? Is it up to code?
You've been a prairie farm leader. It's how safe you need it to be.
We're privileged and it's an honor to have his family here with us tonight as well. And I'm going to introduce him at this time, and I'll ask him to stand as I introduce him. Son Paul. Daughter Lori and husband Blair Dangler. Son Aaron and wife Megan.
Wife Edie Marshall.
Edie has been a very good supporter of Greg and his term as president, and very good supporter of APAS as well. We've appreciated her sacrifice in the family in allowing Greg to take the position, and I know Greg was on the road lots. Sometimes in conversation with Greg, he said, you know, I'd just like to be home for a change. And it's an awful sacrifice that everybody makes, and it's greatly appreciated. Give him another round. This time we're going to start the roast or the praise or whatever people have to say. First one on my list is Humphrey Banack, Vice President of CFA and President of CAP.
Got a keyed up there, Raj. We'll get some pictures going. When I first met Greg Marshall here, I've got to know him really very well through the Western farm leaders and prairie farm leaders, and through things where we worked together from Alberta and Saskatchewan, Manitoba's perspective. Greg Marshall stepped into the APAS boots here in Saskatchewan after some very tough times. And we understand that there were some issues within the office, and I know he took a lot of kidding around the table, because those things that were happening around the office, I think that everybody around the CFA table had first rights on movie rights. This was awful close to Peyton Place, eh? And to be quite frank, Greg, he disappointed us. Because it was a one-show wonder. We were hoping for a sequel, and he didn't come through for us. But
Edie was
we thank you very much for all your time. All of us that are involved in this job realize how important our families are to us. Edie, I know, has been a great support to Greg. He adores her. I know the time I talked to him, he's got to go and phone Edie. Like, leave the gin sitting, I got to go phone Edie. No, that didn't happen often, but it did happen. But anyway, thank you, Edie, for your time. You've been a great supporter of Greg. I'm going to relay the story that Prairie Farm Leaders meeting a couple of years ago in Edmonton. She was supporting Greg very well that night. We went down to the Red Piano Bar on Bourbon Street in Edmonton. There was about, probably 12 or 15 of us. And the women sat in the back. There was 7 or 8 women and 8 or 9 guys. We got a seat right by the 2 big red pianos, dueling piano bar, eh? Singing and dancing, playing very good music that Greg and I recognize a lot. As things kind of thinned out, everybody got together at this one table, eh? Rob Brunel was there from Manitoba. His proud claim to fame the next day is he never had the same drink twice and everyone had a different color. I don't know how he didn't get sick. Greg and Edie were dancing on the table or on the chairs, eh? It was a wonderful night. I fell off my chair. The bouncers were there ready to throw us out. And that's where Edie really stepped up at the end of the evening when it was time to go back. Like, Greg couldn't walk. He needed someone to lean on the way home, and Edie was there for him. And I have to mention my wife through all of this because Edie was a great person to lean on, but her sense of right and wrong wasn't that good either. When the three of us Prairie Farm leaders were standing there ready to captivate and take over the Santa Maria in the middle of West Edmonton Mall, Edie was there, go, go, go! And there's my wife Terry saying, get down from there, you guys. You guys have to do press tomorrow on the TV. We don't want to get there early. But it was a great time. And times shared with Greg have always been great. I know that one time we walked off from a meeting down in Ottawa, and we were walking back to the Best Western Hotel we stayed in. It's not that far, let's go for a walk. Well, we walked, it was raining. And it must have been 3 or 4 bars we had to stop in and drink on the way down. And it was really a wonderful night. It was that night that I talked to him that I said, I was going to plan to run for CFA Vice President. He said, that's great, eh? And when I heard about him 3 weeks later that he was going to run for CFA VP, I was kind of disappointed. But Greg, in the long haul, I thank you for that. Because it was an experience that we had. You made me a better person, a better man at CFA, and I had to think about what I really wanted to do when you had to run. It wasn't something that I just come off the cuff with. And I thank you for that, for pushing me to another level at that time. Greg around the table has always been very knowledgeable about Saskatchewan farms, Saskatchewan politics, and understanding how to get the most out of farmers. And truly, he did believe in farming. We have to work with him because I know he sold his red machinery and we could never get him into green. But, he did get rid of the red and he's halfway there. But I think that it's very important that his leadership for me around the table, being a young guy stepping into this job at 50 years old or something, or 49 when I started this job. And to be truthful, I'm the oldest Prairie Farm leader right now because I think I stepped in about 4 or 5 months before Greg did. And I have seniority, so I can say things here. But
Did that ever stop you anyway, something?
My wife is very good at getting me to shut up. She's not here. Anyway, it's always been a pleasure to work with Greg. His knowledge around the table, his leadership, has always been something that I really treasure to come. Whoever steps into a spot, gin and tonic, you will learn to drink gin and tonic. Because the Prairie Farm leaders, we sit down, we drink gin and tonic. We trained Doug Chorney. He's there with us now. Greg and I have trained him there. But thank you very much for that leadership and support you showed me through Prairie Farm leaders. You've made me a better leader. You've pushed me to new heights on every time I step forward. One thing I do remember very well, and Greg, I will always remember this every time I get to this point in my life. We were at the CFA meeting last spring, and I'm standing there like this, and "O Canada's" being sung, and Greg is standing 1 or 2 spots away. And he said to me when we were done, he says, "I just about reached over and slapped you." I'm going like, why? He said, "You do not stand with your hands in your pockets during O Canada." Greg had a long career guiding cadets in this province. Air cadets, I believe it was. And I think that through that leadership, and he came up to me and he says, "I don't ever want to see you stand with your hands in your pocket in O Canada again." And he thought to me, you came to my mind, November 11th this year at our cemetery, with the cenotaph. I had to stand at attention. I couldn't have my hands in the pocket. So, Greg, with that, thank you for everything you've given me. You've given Saskatchewan a lot. I hope you enjoy your retirement. Edie, you got your hands full keeping it at home.
I didn't time that. I don't know if you made it under 3 minutes. Thank you, Humphrey, for those words. This time I'd like to call on Robert Fournier for comments on behalf of the Saskatchewan Wildlife Federation.
I just wanted to say I haven't had too many opportunities to meet with Greg, but over the years we've had a good working relationship with APAS, and of course good working relationships come from leadership. And with Greg as your leader, you people are in great hands, and we've enjoyed working with the organization, and we really hope to continue to do so. And with the retirement of your esteemed leader, we've brought a few things to help him relax. Nice fishing hat from the Federation. so that doesn't get burnt. Fishing rod.
Oh my God.
And jacket, we hope it fits.
Oh.
Thank you, Robert, for those comments. This time, I'm going to introduce Ron Bonnett to comment on behalf of CFA. Ron, please.
Well, first of all, it's a great pleasure to be here tonight. It's really nice to meet your family. Sometimes we spend so much time together, we don't get a chance to meet the family. I learned a few things about Greg, the fact that he knows how to combine diesel fuel and ammonium nitrate. That's a real skill, so when he retires, he may be able to take that skill further on. It's always a bit of a challenge following Humphrey on something like this because he's the master of humor. But I would echo the fact that when Greg took over APAS, there were some troubled times. And we were very disappointed. We were starting to get used to the stories coming out of APAS and the fact that, oh wow, what's coming next? I wonder who's going to be, never mind. But there are a couple of things about Greg. Greg, I think everybody knows he can be a very serious person, and I think one of the things we appreciated about Greg was his thoughtful comments that came out. Like he would sit there, he'd listen to things, and when Greg put up his hand to speak, you knew that he had to be listening. But that thoughtfulness also went beyond just at the meetings, because sometimes he would go out, we'd go out, and Humphrey mentioned it, we'd have a few drinks and we'd be partying along, and but Greg still needed time sometimes to think through the issues. Well, one night we went out, and I can't even remember where we were that night, but we were coming back, and Greg said, well, no, I'm going to go for a walk myself. Well, the next morning we get back, and Greg comes in. I got a limp, but he had a worse limp than I did, and we're trying to figure out what happened. Well, apparently he was walking around deep in thought about some serious issue that was going to really affect Canadian farmers, and he didn't see this car coming. And he got hit by the car, and he got banged up. Well, I was a little bit nervous that in retirement that might happen again, so I thought that maybe what he should do is actually put something on so that...
In Ottawa.
Yeah. Now, if he'd had that on, likely he would have been in a lot better health the next day. But the other thing I think a lot of people don't know about the strength of Greg is his powers of persuasion. They're just unbelievable. Like, he could pull in people from the outside to reinforce his position that nobody can believe. A few years ago, Saskatchewan had rainfall beyond belief. Like everything was flooded. And we were meeting with the ministers, and it was a roundtable meeting with all of the ag ministers in Canada, and Greg had been designated as the person to speak to the issue and try and really reinforce with the ministers the need for some aid. But lo and behold, it turned out one of those days, the sun was shining, the wind was blowing, it was a clear day in Saskatchewan, and it was really hard to think of how you would convince the ministers of this. But within a second or two of Greg starting to speak, the clouds came in, the lightning started flashing, the skies opened up. There was so much rainfall coming down that all of us were shocked that he could pull in a higher power to reinforce his argument. But the thing is, it becomes a safety factor, and I'm not sure like if you're walking around and he starts talking, it could get dangerous. So I decided that maybe we should take a look and see if there's any kind of a safety kit you would need for this. And I found this little compact unit you could likely touch in your purse. That, I think it's critical that you would have this to protect yourself if Greg gets calling you on those higher powers. Anyway, Greg, it has been a joy working with you. You scared the hell out of all of us. Meeting your family, it's been a joy tonight. You have the respect, not only of your family, you have the respect of the province, you have the respect of farmers across Canada. Enjoy.
Thank you.
This time we're going to call forward Norm Nordgulen, who is now a director with SARM, past APAS director and rep, and he tells me that he's converting SARM. So with that, Norm, please.
Greg, when I first met your wife Edie, I always thought you'd overmarried yourself. But now that I've met your family, I know you have. I have the greatest respect for Greg. When I called one day telling him that we were in trouble at Marquis, it wasn't 40 minutes and he was there through the thickest fog that I've ever seen. Yeah, I guess he was practicing for when his glasses get a lot thicker. And by the way, those people weren't waving. I have to tell another story about you too, involving my mother. It's not that bad. But my mother is quite an athlete too in her old age. And she bought herself a 10-speed bike last summer. And Greg was on his way to a meeting and my mother decided it was a good day to go out for a bike ride, and she was heading east towards Moose Jaw on her new 10-speed with a bell and a mirror. And, well, she went too far and she got tired. So along comes Greg, good-hearted Greg, and he stops to see if he could help her. And she says, yes, I got to get back to Moose Jaw, but I got my bike with me. And he had the red Cobalt, his wife's car. And he says, well, I don't want to put this in my wife's car. I'll scratch it all up, but I'll pull you with a rope. And if I get going too fast, you just ring your bell. So it was going fine, and they're heading back to Moose Jaw, and everything's going fine, but oh, here comes this nice-looking redhead with a red Camaro. And Greg's not going to get beat by anybody. And she tried to pass him, well, away he goes. And they're going down the number one back to Moose Jaw, and they're doing about 85, 90 mile an hour, and they pass the billboard just out of town on Moose Jaw where the old junkyard was, and there's a cop behind the billboard. Well, he couldn't believe his eyes. He didn't even chase him. He just radioed into the office. He says, I think I've been sitting here too long. There's a red Cobalt and a red Camaro racing down number one, and there's an old lady on a 10-speed ringing her bell trying to pass. I have to tell you another story. Edie, don't get offended, but this is a true one. Greg and I were sitting in the APAS office one day talking recruitment as usual, and there was a nice painting behind his, you heard that already. There was a nice painting behind the desk, and after a while I'm looking at it, and being the art critic I am, I told Greg, I said, geez, I don't know where you got that, but I hope we didn't pay too much for it. And I never saw anyone with such a hurtful, hateful, bewildered, and he laughed at the same time, and he says, well, my wife painted that. So it's one of the many times I had my 8.5 size boot in my mouth. And it's going to happen again. And also, Greg, I went to Ottawa with you, and you know what they say in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happens there stays there, but Ottawa ain't Vegas. And I have the greatest respect for you. When Niall took his bar hopping, and Niall's a very bad guide.
Yeah.
We ended up in this house where there was some lady entertainment, and I give Greg the greatest respect. He was the last one to enter. And he was the last one to leave. But really, I do have the greatest respect for you. I've seen you come come around with crowds large and small. You've calmed them down, you brought them towards you when they were kind of hostile. And after you leave, the common question was, who was that masked man? You had dark glasses on. But you leave an impression on everyone you meet. You're an honorable, unimposing, knowledgeable individual capable of winning over the most stubborn of opponents. And I know, because I was one of them. If you remember, I was one of them. But I've come to love you as a great friend. I consider you a valuable, close, and dear friend, one who I look up to and who I try and model myself after. And I'll back you up anytime, anywhere, you just call.
Congratulations. Congratulations, Greg. Now, I want to thank you all for inviting me tonight. The meal was delicious. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. It was a great meal. Now, where did they say that secret button is for electricity? That chair. Somewhere around here. Anyway, you talked about troubled times with APAS. Well, Greg certainly came upon a time when there was troubled times, and he did a marvelous job of organizing a cohesive unit and getting things organized. And I want to thank you for inviting me for the evening, the banquet. I want to say it's been great working with Greg. That is so true. He's been down to earth, easy to talk to, and friendly. But you know, Greg Marshall had a bad year. First, his team did not do well on the playing field, as you know. Then he was fired as the coach. Then he has a heart attack. Wow, a tough year. Seriously, though, I want to stress that Greg has been easy to deal with and has done an excellent job communicating the APAS point of view with the media. I will miss working with him and wish him a very speedy get well. But I must admit, since he had his heart attack, I've interviewed him twice already. I've already made use of his heart attack to get on the air. My counterpart in Saskatoon, Neil Billinger, he works at CDWW, and him and I trade stories back and forth quite regularly. Want to wish you well as well. And he pointed out that some farm leaders can be very formal. Greg is easy to shoot the breeze with. There may be one problem point, though, in that communication area. He kept talking when he was talking farm policy, and you know, most of it I understood. It was easy to understand, but he kept talking about this Alice girl. He wanted the government to do something with Alice, and it would help farmers. And finally I realized he meant alternative land use services. Alice. Paying farmers to protect the environment. Great idea, but good thing your wife's name was Edie, not Alice. And I also, though, have to tell you something personal, and I don't want to tell anyone. I shared a needle with Greg. When I went for my H1N1 flu shot, Greg and I wound up together waiting the 15 minutes afterwards to ensure there was no allergic reaction. So we were fine, and I guess they were disposable needles, so we really didn't share one. But what reporter lets the facts get in the way of a good story? APAS and I go a long way back. I was a speaker at one of your earlier banquets, and thank you for tonight's invitation. I wish the organization a long and fruitful future. And the new president, whoever it is, remember, you're announced to the media at 11:30, but then you immediately walk 2 blocks that way to CKRM Radio Studios. And if you're there in time, we'll do a nice little 3 or 4 minute interview. If you're not, if you're late, 12:30 or later, you're going live. Thanks so much. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you. Now we know some guys will do anything to get a radio interview, even a heart attack. I have a letter from Honorable Minister Bob Benrod. The only way we could have got him here tonight, probably because he's so busy, would have been to kidnap him, and I didn't think that was a good idea, so he agreed to send some words for you, Greg, and I will read them at this time. I would like to take this opportunity to thank former APAS President Greg Marshall for his contributions to our province and his work and leadership on behalf of Saskatchewan producers. I enjoyed a good working relationship with Greg during his time as president and valued his input. I wish Greg all the best in the future. I hope you have a productive and successful AGM. Sincerely, Bob Benrock. This time I'm going to call on our Executive Director, Niall Kuyak. Niall, please.
So Greg, I'll bet you're happy it's me up here, not Aj, eh? As I said yesterday to the AGM, it's just been wonderful to have Greg as president. I think Aj and I have been in the office the entire time that Greg has been president, and we've enjoyed it very much, as have the other staff. We did have to do some things to break him into the office. You know, we brought a coach in eventually because, you know, as a farmer, he had to have that afternoon nap. So we got a coach in. We also had to teach him how to go golfing during the week when farmers were seeding or combining and not feel guilty about it. And that took some time. He always had twinges of guilt doing that. I'm glad to hear Humphrey's story because, you know, I didn't go to that meeting in Edmonton, and Greg came back, and I said, well, Greg, you know, what happened with the TV interviews, and what happened with this, and what happened to that? And he said, well, we didn't do that. We didn't have time. And now I find out it was a little different from that, apparently. But he fooled me for about 3 years. All the staff thoroughly enjoyed working with Greg. He was dedicated to serving members, member needs and member issues were always the first question and priority. He was passionate. He was fun, and I guess we've concluded that you would simply have to call him a true gentleman in anything he does. And I'm not going to take any more words. As I said yesterday, Brenda is very creative with video, and she's put together a video of Greg's time with APAS that we'd like to share with you now.
Tell you, life isn't just what you think. It's full of puzzles, still just a puzzle to me. And every time you think you're ahead, it's not what it seems. Life tends to happen while you're still making your plans. So dare to dream big, 'cause it's worth taking a chance. And when tomorrow comes, you will know you gave everything. So just do what you love and love what you do. There's so many things in life and they're all here for just you. Do what you love and do it for you. Smile every day. You can do anything. At times we find ourselves by the risk that we take. Turns out the best part of life is the love that we make. Seek the answers to all your questions. What can you see? We're all connected in life. We're all part of the same. The time we have here, short, but it's worth everything. No matter what, just know that there's nothing you cannot be. So just do what you love and love what you do. There's so many things in life and they're all here for you. Just do what you love and do it for you. Smile every day. You can do it at times. It'll feel just like when it rains, it pours, you will see. And at times it'll seem just like all the walls closed in on me. Just gotta believe. So just do what you love and love what you do. There's so many things in life and they're all here for you. Just do what you love and do it for you. Smile every day. You can do anything.
tell you at the outset, when you were watching that video and there were words on it, Brenda gave the board a task at the last board meeting, and that was each board member had to give her 3 words that described Greg. So when you saw all those words like dedicated, and passionate, and honest, and all those words that were there, those were all words from the board of directors, reflecting their views of their president.
Greg, do you want to see the ones the staff wrote? They're all in the bathroom. You can read them all in there.
This time I'm going to call on Vice President Don Connick to give some comments on behalf of the Board of Directors, the reps. Don, please.
You have to endure it a while longer. Greg, it was Shakespeare that said, all the world's a stage. And if he'd been born a couple of 100 years later, he probably would have said, all the world's a movie. And Greg, I first met you in a movie quite a few years ago called Farm Lab. And that movie starred Dr. Don Rennie, and Greg and I had bit parts in that movie. So it was wonderful to become reacquainted with you again when you came to play in a movie called APAS. And I remember when Greg first came and came to the board table and sat down, and how wonderful it was to see his smiling face, all new and eager and ready to go and get at this new project. At that time, I never dreamed, and I know you never dreamed either, Greg, that in the future we would stand shoulder to shoulder as president and vice president of APAS. And I remember the wonderful, warm feeling that I had at that time, knowing that I was going to be working with Greg and knowing that the board was going to have some wonderful leadership and that it was a new era for APAS. Greg and I worked well together, and we've had all sorts of tributes and funny things, and I have to relate a wonderful experience that I had with Greg when we were in Winnipeg. And we had the privilege of going out to dinner with Doug Churney, the president of CAP. And Doug took us out to a Japanese restaurant, the Ichiban. And I knew that Greg was sophisticated, but I did not know he was such a man of the world until that evening. And the young Japanese lady came in her kimono and said, what would you like to drink? Without hesitation, Greg ordered a Sapporo. Now, I didn't know whether a Sapporo was hard liquor or soda pop. Turns out it was a Japanese beer. I thought, hey, this is good. He said a Japanese restaurant orders a Japanese beer. I don't think I ever laughed so much during a meal as we did that night. The antics of our table mates and our chef just kept us in stitches all night. And it was, at that time, Doug had just been elected president of CAP, so the chef undertook to give him the president's test. And the president's test was the chef spun an egg on the grill, then he took his spatula, flipped it, and fired it at about 140 kilometers an hour straight at Doug. Doug was adept enough to catch that egg in midair, and it didn't even break. Then the chef said, oh, that's number 1 test. Now number 2 test. He took another egg, spun it, and fired it at Doug again, and Greg managed to catch it in midair without breaking it again. Now I looked over at Greg. Did I say Greg got it? Doug got it. I looked over at Greg, and I fully expected Greg was going to stick up his hand and say, hey, I'm a president too, you know. But for some strange reason, you didn't volunteer, and I wanted to see that, Greg. In APAS, we did not test Greg by throwing eggs at him. But we did test his skill, we tested his endurance, we tested his knowledge, we tested his patience, and we tested his diplomacy. And Greg, you passed every one of those tests with flying colors. Greg became recognized and respected everywhere he went, in Saskatchewan and in the rest of Canada, nationally, in his work with CFA. Greg has always been a loyal ambassador for APAS and for agriculture. And this movie could have ended as a tragedy, but instead, it had a happy ending, and we're all grateful for that, Greg. And I hope that we'll continue to see you as we move and work in this big circle of agriculture in this province and in this country, and that we never know what movie Greg may be starring in next. So Greg, it is with great pleasure that I present a gift to you on behalf of the board and of the representatives and all members of APAS in recognition of the leadership that you brought to APAS in your term as president. Thank you, Greg.
Well, we left the best for the last.
Okay.
Our comedian, Aj. Greg, I will give you the podium now to reply. Greg, please.
You had me worried. I thought Aj was coming up.
The stories I could tell, eh?
Pretty smart. Put me up here so I couldn't make notes while everybody was talking. Oh boy. Love and love what you do. That's so appropriate. It's it fits so well. You know, I could say I put my heart into it.
We just found out you had one of those.
You know, it was surprising, you know, that it surprised a lot of folks, you know. A leader is only as good as the people around him. And this whole story is about you, about all of you. It really is. And I want to take some time, if I could, to just mention single out a few folks. It's so special to me to see such a wide range of representation here tonight. But I really and truly, it's special for me to have my family. You know, Edie is. I want to tell you a story about Edie. Edie is spelled E-D-I-E. And a lot of people call the house and they say, hello, Mr. Marshall, is Eddie there? I get a little perturbed with that. And so my standard response now is that no, that son of a gun was cheating on me and I threw him out, but now I got Edie. So, you know, to put Edie through what I have put her through all of these years, and especially the last 3, and especially the last couple of months, has been quite something, and I don't know how she was able to take it. But we've been together a long, long time. We've just 10 days ago or so, we celebrated our 38th anniversary. And back back in those days, they let people get married when they were 12.
Can we just make that your anniversary gift then too?
Sure, that'll work. But, you know, I can honestly say that Edie was never behind me, and she was never beside me. She was always out in front. And, you know, I'd come home and grumble and bitch about some obstinate government person or grouchy farmer, and she was always out in front and was able to see through all of that fuzziness and say, well, here's how you should react. And it's certainly been words of wisdom every time, and I thank you. I mentioned that I put her through some terrible times this last little while, and you know, it's I have to tell the story, because on the morning of September 29th, my body was laying there and in our bedroom, a very, very familiar room in our house, obviously. And, you know, when I finally opened my eyes, I saw Edie. There was no furniture, there was no paramedics, there was nothing in that room, just Edie. And I'd love to tease her about that, because I say, you know, why is it that you were standing there reading my life insurance policy? Pardon me. We have to make light of it. So, and I guess that was one very definite thing that I've stated as the reason that I have to step down. And because Edie's raised a very wonderful family, and I'm so glad that most of you are here. And I wanted to, Niall introduced you, and I certainly want to do that again. We have our daughter Lori and her husband Blair Dangler. And Lori and Blair live at Watrous, and Lori works for the RCMP, and Blair raises John Deere's. So I get to go and have my farming fixed with Blair. Son Paul is here, and Marcy wasn't able to. Marcy's back at the farm with our 3 grandsons, and I wasn't able to come tonight, but I wish she would have been able to be here as well as the grandkids. But welcome, Paul, and Greg Marshall II is here as well. But to avoid confusion, we call him Aaron, and his wife Megan. I love you all, and thank you for your support. And I want to especially mention the staff, and Sharon and Brenda, Oj, Doug, and Niall. Oftentimes they've referred to me, I heard them referring to me as the boss, our boss. And I always shuddered at that, because I never wanted to be a boss. I wanted to be a leader. And in my world, there's 2 very big differences in those 2 roles. And I hope that I've been able to be a leader, and now that I'm done with this job, I want to become a friend. We can have some fun together, and we could go do that golfing and all those kinds of things that I guess I was at times maybe a little bit too much about work and nose to the grindstone. But I certainly do appreciate all you've done. I
really appreciated all of the times that we as a group sat with big steaming mugs of jet fuel. And we had emails and newspapers and the knowledge of the morning's news, and we sat and we brainstormed and we talked about all of these things and how they're all interconnected and how everything fits in our everyday lives and how everything fits back behind the farm gate and how everything fits with farm policy. And boy, I'm going to miss that. It's just great, great stuff. And the knowledge that the staff group has, this knowledge that each of you have, the wisdom that all of you bring, the dedication to farm causes is something that I've carried with me for the last 3 years into every meeting I went to, every conference I went to, and every conversation I entered into. You were part of that. And I certainly appreciate your support. This term that I served, and it's been a tremendous honor to serve, has been all about you. It's not about me. It's all about you, folks. And I'm guilty of drawing from you all the time, because it has been all about you, and I certainly hope that I've lived up to your expectations. And I want to thank you for all of the wonderful gifts here that that fishing rod, boy, that fishing rod looks great. Damn this province, it's frozen over for a few months. I can't go fishing just right tomorrow. But and I want to say a little something about this annual meeting in particular, and I don't know whether it's me, maybe it is, but I see something very special in this annual meeting. There's a lot of fantastic conversation going on, a lot of exciting things going on, the launch of myrm.ca, and the launch of Alice, my girlfriend. Believe me, I don't want to ever get too far from Alice, neither. And it is a very, very special meeting, and I wish you all the best tomorrow. I wish you all the very best in the future. And I'm not going to say my heart goes with you, because I have to keep what I got. My thoughts are certainly going to travel with all of you, and I know that, yes, I'm going to miss all of the issues and the farm policy directives, but more so I'm going to miss all of you, and I thank you very, very much. Thank you.